1-point linear perspective. So the thought is that Brunelleschi either invented or discovered linear perspective, or he somehow rediscovered it, and it was lost from the Greeks and the Romans. And basically, it's the idea that you can draw a vanishing point, you can draw a shape, and then you connect the corners of the shape to the vanishing point, and it creates the illusion of depth using linear perspective. All right, so a lot of terms there. Linear perspective. Linear is the expansion of the word line, so to draw with lines. And perspective is about perception. And in this case, it's to perceive depth and to create the illusion of three-dimensional depth. So linear perspective, creating the illusion of three-dimensional depth with lines. And here's a great example. These boxes look like they're zooming out at us. And the way the artist has achieved that is with linear perspective. And it is how we see the world. We see things as they go off into the distance as getting smaller. So you look at this and the trees get smaller as they go in the distance. The fence posts get smaller. And not only do they get smaller, but they get smaller at a consistent and predictable rate. And that's what vanishing point does for us. So a little bit about this is linear perspective is a system just like math is. And just like math, it can get more and more complex. So you know that. You were young, you learned addition, and it's an incredibly powerful system. But then it has its limitations, and you learn subtraction, then multiplication, then division, then calculus, so on and so on. Perspective's the same. We're going to look at 1-point perspective, and it's a very effective system, but there are more complex views in the world. 2-point perspective, 3-point. Then you can actually bring all these perspectives together. Then sometimes you need what's called false vanishing points. So we're going to look at linear perspective. You're going to see it as both effective, and you might think like, oh, it's not complex enough. And you're right. There is a more complex world out there. So our three our vocabulary words: vanishing point, orthogonal, and face of an object. The vanishing point is the point in the drawing where the lines recede to or appear to vanish to. Orthogonal, it's just the name for a line that goes to the vanishing point. Tap into what you already know. This word is almost familiar. We know terms like diagonals, horizontal, vertical. Well, this now is another term that describes a line. And in this case, it describes a line that goes to the vanishing point. And then when you do 1-point perspective, you always start with a shape, or you could call it the face of an object. And that's the flat surface shape of the object. Or you can also call it the facade. In fact, the root word for facade is face. So the facade of a building. So vanishing point, orthogonal, and face of an object. And looking at that now, you can see there's a single vanishing point in this picture, represented by the blue dot. And then there's several orthogonals. They're all vanishing to the vanishing point. And an orthogonal is defined by that. The green lines happen to be diagonals. The red line is a horizontal, but because they all terminate at that blue dot, they are orthogonals. And you can see how this system is quite simple and really effective. And it was one of the first ways that video games were designed. You would plot a vanishing point, and then you'd have all the lines be orthogonals, and suddenly you were creating simple depth. So this is what I'd like you to draw. I'd like you to get a sheet of printer paper, put a vanishing point in the middle, and we're going to draw 5 boxes. So you have your printer paper. In the middle of the page, you put a vanishing point. And in the lower right corner, you draw a square or rectangle. And you just connect the corners to the vanishing point. So you connect the corners with orthogonals to the vanishing point. Then let's try a long, narrow rectangle at the top of your image. And you draw that. And then you connect the corners to the vanishing point. Let's do another. We'll draw a rectangle in the lower left corner, and we're going to connect those corners using orthogonals. Now, this is interesting. No new rule, just a little technique here. We're going to draw a tall rectangle in the left, and we're going to connect the corners to the vanishing point with orthogonals. But look at that lower one. And what happens is that line that I drew is an orthogonal. It is an orthogonal, but I don't have to draw it all the way. It's kind of like an arrow aimed at a target. It's traveling that path. It's pointed there, but it doesn't have to have this physical line. And then we do the same on the right side of the paper. And you can see how artists eventually started incorporating this into their work. This painting is well known for having a little pin mark, a hole right in the middle where the vanishing point is. And the artist used that hole and string to help him draw his vanishing point in orthogonals. I did want to stop here and show you what it looked like before this was discovered. This is a painting from the early Italian Renaissance. It's by Lorenzetti. He lived in Siena, and he did this series of government. And this is his painting, The Allegory of Good Government. And Lorenzetti is from Siena. And so you can see sort of this element of perspective, but it's chaotic. Things slant down, they slant upwards, they're horizontal. It seems like perspective, but kind of fractured and broken so that it's not really consistent. And that's what Brunelleschi discovered. He discovered that seeing these tilted lines is correct, but that they had a logic to them, that they were consistent. And so I've roughly drawn some of the orthogonals onto this painting, but you can see there's a vanishing point, and then there's a consistent, coherent design to it. So this has this sort of underlying logic, where this one seems to have some observation, but it's just a little chaotic. And so what I'd like you guys to do is I want you to draw this image, take a photograph of it, and submit it to me through our Canvas classrooms. Thanks, guys.